Greetings, welcome back to the channel Humanity, Facts and Mysteries. For most of human history, illness was not understood as a biological process. It was experienced as intrusion. Something entered the body, altered it, and left behind visible changes that could not be explained. People did not think of disease as neutral or accidental. If a healthy person suddenly weakened, if the skin lost color, if blood appeared where it should not, if the mind behaved strangely, then something had happened to them. Something had acted. Communities did not lack attention or observation, they lacked explanation. Without anatomy, without microbiology, without an understanding of internal processes, sickness could not be invisible. It had to come from somewhere, and whatever came from somewhere could be imagined. Illness was therefore interpreted not as malfunction, but as presence. The body was seen as a boundary, and when that boundary failed, something crossed it. This idea shaped how symptoms were perceived. Visible change mattered more than internal pain. A person who grew pale, lost weight, coughed blood, trembled, convulsed, or spoke incoherently was not simply sick. They were changing. They were becoming something else. Certain diseases were especially effective at creating this perception. Tuberculosis slowly drained the body while leaving consciousness intact. People wasted away over months, coughing blood, growing thinner, fading while remaining aware. Life did not seem to end suddenly. It seemed to be taken gradually. Blood became central because blood was understood as life itself. When blood left the body, life left with it. If blood appeared at the mouth or soaked into cloth, it meant that something vital was being consumed. Other illnesses produced different but equally disturbing patterns. Rabies caused aggression, confusion, and biting. People lost control of their behavior and appeared to become animal-like. Seizures bent bodies violently and without warning, producing movements that seemed external to the person experiencing them. Ergot poisoning caused hallucinations, visions, and sensations of being attacked or possessed. These experiences were not abstract. They were physical, terrifying, and unpredictable. Each illness produced a recognizable pattern, and patterns invite explanation. People noticed that symptoms often worsened at night. Fever rose after sunset. Delirium intensified in darkness. Shadows distorted familiar faces. Sounds carried further and seemed closer than they were. Night altered perception, and altered perception reinforced fear. Transformation appeared to belong to darkness. Communities began to speak of forces that fed on the sick, forces that weakened people from within. Forces that returned again and again until death followed. Monsters were not invented as stories first, they were inferred as causes. The vampire emerged from wasting illness, from the slow disappearance of strength and blood. The werewolf reflected uncontrollable violence, infection, and the fear of losing human restraint. Demons mirrored seizures, psychosis, and the sudden loss of agency over one's own body. These figures were not metaphors meant to entertain, they were explanations meant to protect. Illness spread through families and villages, and when several people became sick or died in sequence, coincidence felt impossible. The cause had to be shared. Contagion was understood socially before it was understood biologically. Something was among them, something that moved from body to body. Fear reshaped behavior. The sick were watched carefully. The dying were isolated. The dead were treated in unusual ways. Bodies were restrained, buried differently, or altered after death. Not out of cruelty, but out of prevention. Communities believed they were responding to a real threat. Illness was not passive. It acted, it persisted, it returned. As long as disease could not be explained, it had to be contained, and containment required form. That form became the monster. What ultimately changed the relationship between illness and monsters was not compassion or enlightenment, but explanation. As medical knowledge slowly developed, disease began to move from the outside to the inside. Illness was no longer something that entered the body with intent, but something that emerged from processes within it. Anatomy revealed organs, pathology revealed patterns. Germ theory revealed invisible agents that did not think, plan, or judge. This shift was profound because it stripped monsters of their purpose. Vampires stopped being necessary once tuberculosis had a name and a mechanism. Werewolves lost meaning once rabies was understood as infection rather than possession. Demons faded when seizures, psychosis, and sleep disorders could be described without invoking intent. Fear did not disappear, but it changed direction. The unknown no longer had a face. However, this transition was not sudden, and for a long time, old explanations and new knowledge existed side by side. People consulted doctors while still performing rituals. Medicine treated the body while folklore treated anxiety. One addressed symptoms, the other addressed meaning, and meaning is often slower to disappear than belief. Even as science advanced, illness continued to carry moral weight. Certain diseases were associated with shame, danger, or impurity. The language people used revealed this. Disease was still described as an enemy, an invader, something to be fought, something that attacked. The structure of fear remained, even when the monsters were gone. This explains why new forms of monsters emerged in modern times. Invisible threats replaced visible ones. Germs, radiation, contamination, and environmental exposure took on the role once held by vampires and demons. They were unseen, pervasive, and capable of killing without warning. The form changed, but the logic stayed the same. Humans seek agency behind suffering. When illness feels arbitrary, it feels intolerable. Monsters provided structure. They turned randomness into narrative. They allowed communities to believe that suffering followed rules, and that rules could be acted upon. This is why monsters were often defeated through action. Stakes were driven, bodies were burned, rituals were performed. These acts restored a sense of control, even if they did nothing medically. Control mattered more than accuracy. With modern medicine, control shifted to explanation and prevention. Vaccines replaced rituals. Hygiene replaced exorcism. Diagnosis replaced accusation. But the psychological need that created monsters never fully vanished. It adapted. Even today, during outbreaks and pandemics, fear quickly searches for faces. Blame is assigned. Groups are othered. Rumors spread faster than facts. The structure is ancient. Only the vocabulary is new. Looking back at how illness created monsters is not about mocking the past. It is about recognizing a pattern that still operates beneath modern language. Monsters were not born from ignorance alone. They were born from observation without explanation, from fear without tools, from suffering without answers. They were attempts to make sense of a world where bodies failed and death arrived without warning. When explanation arrived, monsters lost their grip, but fear did not disappear. It simply learned to speak a different language. Understanding this helps explain not only the past, but the present. It reminds us that when people face uncertainty about their bodies and their survival, they will always search for meaning before they search for truth. And sometimes, meaning arrives wearing the face of a monster. Which modern fears do you think will one day look like myths to future generations? Write your thoughts in the comments. Stay with humanity, facts and mysteries, because the past is not only something we study, it is something we repeat whenever understanding falls behind fear.